want to talk about more stuff in Crimea. Since my last video, a lot of things have happened, and I was talking about how the Russian troops were technically on the borders of Crimea. They had not entered yet, except for one particular case of terrorism at a gas station. Well, since then, apparently the Russian troops have entered, and the referendum, of course, had already been placed, and there was a 97% vote to annex with Russia. And I mentioned in that last video that we would see if the illegal coup that took over Yanukovych's parliament, we'd see if they upheld their end of the bargain, because they had said that if the people voted, that they would support the people. But remember, the parliament, the guy in there is this Yatsenyuk guy that I showed you video in that banker suicides one, where he's screaming about destroying Russians, communists, and Jews. And then I also showed you the video of the neo-Nazis. I'm literally wearing Nazi yellow SS armbands, marching through the streets, beating people down. And there was an interview with BBC where one of them was saying, oh, we're not like Hitler, but we're a little bit like Hitler because we want the Russians to just go away. We want one clean country. Notice he didn't say they wanted those of the Russian ethnic group to be free to choose, because in Crimea specifically, they have a severe majority. No, he wanted them to leave. And that's who we're dealing with. And of course, the United States, just to keep you up to date, is calling this new government run by this Premier Yatsenyuk, who happens to be a banker. They're calling it the legal government, although Yatsenyuk, the neo-Nazi, was the guy that came in with an AK-47 and took over. Even though Yatsenyuk did not become democratically elected in 2010, he ran and failed, and Yanukovych was the one that was democratically elected. So it's ironic that the United States is saying, oh, this referendum was non-democratic, it was due to bullying. Well, to quote Ron Paul recently, he said, so what? Where were they in Iraq when they had an election under United States occupation? And they screamed that it was a triumph for democracy. So at the point of the referendum, the Russian troops weren't even occupying, although they were outside, at the request of Yanukovych, the legally democratically elected president, who had to flee. So remember, I know the CIA's game plan, okay? Spec Ops, I'm familiar, very close to people who've been in that. And I know the operation tactics that are used. When someone doesn't give in to the globalist banker BS, what ends up happening is the CIA sends in some fake protesters who are violent, which is what happened to Yanukovych. These protesters came in, these neo-Nazi crazy guys. They toppled the government. So they were criticizing Yanukovych for cracking down on protesters, saying it was an invasion of free speech. But really, I have reason to believe, just from my military background and the research I've done on the CIA, these protesters probably weren't even from Crimea or the Ukraine, or they were instigated by the CIA if they weren't directly the CIA. So he fled, and this, neo-Nazi guy takes over. So here we are, the referendum takes place. They claim they would back up the people. Of course they didn't. And the premier gets on the television and talks to Barack Obama like they're best buds, this criminal guy that took over, who didn't win the election. Oh, we want our freedom, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, if there's a revolution going on, in my opinion, the revolution is the vote to annex with Russia because of the neo-Nazi oppression. Remember, before Yanukovych was ran out by these crazy neo-Nazi people that appeared a couple of months after he denied the EU trade deal, he had majority support denying the EU trade deal. Okay? So he had majority support. If you go to Jewish News 1, you get one kind of side to things. If you go to RT, you get a different side of things. But here you can see the next logical step is a false flag. And, I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently 2 people, according to some reports, 2 people were shot. According to the illegal prime minister, Mr. Rabbit, it was one Tatar who was shot, and they're blaming Putin. Now, if you go to the RT, they're actually reporting that it was 2 people, and it was a shootout, and they're waiting confirmation to see who it was. But yes, that the premier did jump to blame Putin. We don't really know. None of us really know unless we were there. Okay? But what ended up happening is, yes, Putin did sign a document giving sovereignty to Crimea and agreeing to annex them, although he claimed before that he had no interest in that. And as soon as he did that, that's when this guy gets shot. The premier goes on and says, oh, this is horrible. So here we have our false flag. And I just want to go over this article because this article really amazes me. Putin puts fear of God in New World Order. Of course, I would say yeah, but whatever. No one's perfect. But, this article really hits the nail on the head because New World Order, if you've ever read Revelation or if you've ever watched Alex Jones or listened to any of my stuff, one of their goals is a global currency. And many people think that NATO, the International Monetary Fund, the UN, have to do with that. And here we have the EU and NATO trying to offer the Ukraine this trade deal when they were in dire straits. But the trade deal wasn't good for them. Of course, it just put them more in debt to NATO and cost them more money for energy instead of helping them. So it's no wonder they wanted to go with Russia. Russia is the only superpower, okay, that's not, Russia and China, that don't participate in these globalized central banks. So let me read this article to you. In the wake of Crimea's independence referendum, Hillary Clinton says, that's a joke. Anyway, Russian President Putin is, quote, a new Hitler. Okay? Brzezinski, a former national security advisor, agrees, calling him not just another Hitler, but a thug, a menace, a mafia gangster, and a Mussolini. It's ironic to me that Hillary and this national security advisor aren't mentioning that the United States is supporting people who actually verbally, on the air with BBC, identify themselves with Hitler. Okay? So that's just completely ironic that the United States media isn't mentioning the ethnic cleansing that they're trying to do against the Russian-born citizens of Crimea, and they're calling it an undemocratic vote, but they're putting in an undemocratic premier. So they're saying that Putin's this horrible guy, but I can't help it. It just seems like it's the United States, guys. Okay. So this wonderful person writing this article, Kevin Barrett, great article. He's talking about Putin standing up against the New World Order, basically. He's not, Putin and the Ukraine, they were trying to avoid this. So does North Korea, so does Russia, and other countries. Because Putin is standing up against Western aggression, not only in Ukraine, but also in Syria and Iran. That's why we don't like him. That's why we're calling him names. Okay? And he goes through the history, and I'll put the link to this article below. But here's some interesting things about Obama, since his administration is calling Putin Hitler. The CIA's 1965 Indonesia coup, remember, CIA does coups all the time, was one of the biggest holocausts in history, according to Princeton history professor Simpson. Quote, the U.S. and British governments did everything in their power to ensure that the Indonesian army would carry out the mass killings of more than 1 million people following the coup against Sukarno. Most of the victims were tortured before they were murdered. The list of names of people to be tortured and murdered was provided by the CIA to their hired Indonesian thugs. Does this sound familiar, you guys? While this was going on, 5-year-old Barack Obama was living in Indonesia with his stepfather, Lolo Soetoro, who was working for, guess who, guys? The American mass murderers. That's right. Obama's stepfather was a Holocaust perpetrator. So, Come on, really? You know, tens of millions of people have been killed in these coups. Americans and Western allies. This is how they function, you guys. This is how they function. And he talks more about it, and he says it's worth noting that Russia and Iran, the two most successfully resisting the NWO, are doing so in the name of God. Listen to this quote by Putin. And I have to say, I agree. President Putin enjoys overwhelming popularity in Russia due to his defense of traditional religious values. Remember, the New World Order is run by Satan. And Satan is a pervert, a murderer, a child-sacrificing liar, okay? The father of lies. But listen, in his State of the Nation address, Putin said, quote, "Many Euro-Atlantic countries have moved away from their roots, including Christian values. Policies are being pursued that place on the same level a multi-child family and a same-sex partnership, a faith in God, and a belief in Satan." And that is so true. So true. Now, I'm a constitutionalist, so I think same-sex marriages are constitutional, and I support that, although it's against my religion. But I have respect for Putin standing up. I really do, on that remark. He's not making gay illegal. He's simply making gay propaganda illegal. And if any of you have watched Jon Stewart or Colbert, I've been watching them for the last month. I have counted one episode of Colbert in the last week out of the last month where homosexuality wasn't being propagandized. It is a straight up agenda, you guys. So I just wanted to point all that out to you. If you like listening to the truth, then please subscribe here on YouTube, and you can check me out on Blog Talk Radio, or you can visit EdenCultures.com, and I'm going to keep publishing because the truth shall set you free. I hope you enjoy your day. Keep looking out for the NWO. This is me looking out for you, Heather Davis. Bye-bye.